Anyway, let me give you the background of Kaleikoa. And Kaleikoa, I hope this is correct, so just correct me if I'm wrong, yeah? Because I got it from the internet, and sometimes they lie. He's a professor of Hawaiian studies at UH Maui. He graduated from Baldwin High School, where I taught for 21 years, and UH Manoa. He was a lecturer of Hawaiian language at UH Manoa, also taught in the Hawaiian language immersion program and at Kinke Kaulike. And he's been the cultural education program manager for the Kaho'olawi Island Preservation Commission and was awarded the UH Regents Medal for Excellence in Teaching in 2012? 2012? Something like that. Something like that. Anyway, I'd like to introduce to you Kaleikoa Ka'eo. Professor.
Ala ua mala mala moele kana ka iluna wa ka ko akula ka akali. Nau I hoi kau puava uli puava ke a moa ka ni moa ini mai kina kau lele kalani. O wau ke liu liu e kiaka. O te aka no ia mai taiti tu a taiti moi mai taiti tapatapu a ka ni. E ia mai ka pule ka wai ha ke akua. Ka nai nai a oi te atua. E ula no e toho po atane e ata mauli ola. E ola hoi, o mauli ola. E ola oi tane tumelon, oia ho oia, e ola. Aloha aina kako. Vilina me ki aloha, o au ne o Kaleikoa Ka'eo, he keki papa no hoi no kia mokupuni o Maui. Hana ia ma kia mokupuni ne. Ke noho ne, mako me ko ohana, ma waiahuli. No leila, mahalo kia poe o keo kea. Nane ho kele nei kia papahana. No ka la ho'o mana'o, no ka la ku'oko'a, no leila. Aloha. First of all, I'd like to thank all the organizers of this event and especially the Keokea Homestead Association, all you guys who work hard to put on this event and actually putting on this space here for our people. And to me, this exactly is what nation building is all about, of course, is we making space for ourselves to do the things necessary for ourselves, to not just educate, whether it's economics, whether it's sharing, cultural learning, community, bonding. These kinds of events are so important to the future of our keiki and, of course, our Lahui Kanaka in general. So I want to mahalo everybody for putting this on. Double check. Time-wise, just like I gotta make sure I double check at a time. I've been known to ramble, so I gotta make sure. Wahia ka poe kupuna. Ai. O ki au I hala. Yeah. Ko akahiko, mai ka po mai. O ki au I kahuli, vela ka honua, o ki au I kahuli, lole kalani. And those are the opening lines of one of our greatest cosmogonies. Genealogies, histories, songs of poetry, or mele, mo'akua, that comes down from time immemorial. Well, what's important from the kumulipo, o kumulipo kekane o po'ele kawahine. In the Hawaiian consciousness, in the Hawaiian worldview, when you ask the question, for our Lahui Kanaka, we the people, when do we begin as a people? And our kupuna said, o ki au I hala, yeah, ko wā kahiko loa, yeah, o ki au I kahuli, vela ka honua, that from the beginning of time itself, we didn't start in 1776, we didn't start in 1492, we didn't start in 1 AD, but in our own stories, we began as a people from the beginning of the beginning, the foundation of time itself. O ki au I kahulid, au, the time, the space, the current, and you heard that word, time and space, and you all should be familiar with that language of time and space. The great Einstein talked about time and space as the beginning. And yet, our kupuna, in their first foundational explanation of what it begins, is the same concept that even people like Einstein later found out thousands of years later after our people already understood. the sense of time and space in the very beginning. It turns and moves. Today they call it singularity, they call it the Big Bang. Kuka'yakakala, which causes the sun to appear and shine. But the point is to remember, when you think in the Hawaiian consciousness, our consciousness as a people began in the beginning of time itself. And that's a particular way of philosophy of understanding how we see the world. We are not separate from everything that comes before us. In fact, we're just the last chapter of this great, great narrative, this great, great story. So it provides a kind of particular way to see the world. And from the very beginning of time in the cosmos, the birth of the stars, this place. And in fact, even talks about, Kumulipo, Wa'akahi. Hanau ukoko, hanau kanaka ako ako puka, hanau tete unuleho puhono, hanau kane toi puka, hanau kapea kana keki puka. And he talks about the first, what we call life forms, the biota that comes upon this earth, rises and comes from the ocean. That the life form starts where? In the ocean. Well, the Haole scientists, up into not even 200 years ago, finally figured it out. That, yep, life forms probably began in the ocean. So my point is for us to understand, this is not something we learned from the Europeans. This is something our kupuna already understood. That life itself comes from the ocean. And so all the simple invertebrates that came. In the second wa, in the second chapter, you have all the so-called swimming animals and creatures that in the ocean. In the third wa, you have the different kinds of flying creatures that appear. In the fourth wa, you have the so-called egg layers, the creepers, the crawlers, like the honu, for example. But of course, when we think about the honu, we realize, what does the honu represent? Well, one of the things about the honu is that it's not just a creature from the ocean, but it's a life form that does what? It comes upon the land. So in this poetic way of explaining not just the history of humanity, but the history of all life forms. See, our people already understood there was a time when creatures from the ocean then went upon the land. And in the fifth wa, you have the various kind of mammals that appear, the pig-like animals. And in the sixth wa, you have the rat-like animals. In the seventh wa, you have the dog. And of course, it's in the eighth wa, we have the first being of humanity. And her name is La'ila'i. And in our consciousness, the story, this is part of the history we got to understand, how we looked at our world. La'ila'i doesn't necessarily represent the first human with 10 fingers and 10 toes who walked upright. But what makes us different, perhaps, or different than the other creatures before us, as our kupuna tells us, is a sense of consciousness, something about our mentality and spirituality that makes us different as beings, is this, the awakening, the consciousness. So in the first 7 wa, from all wa kahi ka wa ehiku, the last word that's pronounced is po no. That everything is po. And po is one of those loaded words. Yes, it means darkness, but it doesn't mean necessarily darkness in the sense of just being dark. What it means, of course, is being unconscious. And La'ila'i, what she represents is the first human. And what they mean by first human, again, is this awakening that occurs with La'ila'i. That there may have been beings like her physically before her. But there's something about her in which she transforms into a knowing and conscious, awakened being. And of course, our kupuna, to us, all descend from La'ila'i. And La'ila'i is said to have come from a place called Lalawaya, an ancient homeland. And our kupuna talk about from the sky above, from the heavens above, comes Keli'i Wahilani. And Keli'i Wahilani is this being, is this godlike being from out there, not from here. Yeah, that's one thing I joke around with my students also, is that this is our Hawaiian genealogy where we connect to people like Yoda. Right there. So part of our genealogy doesn't even just come from here. See, part of our worldview is that we come from the beyond. And Keli'i Wahilani mates with La'ila'i. And this begins the birth of Ki'i and Kane and Kanaloa, our great ancestors that we all descend from. And when La'ila'i comes forward as a being, it also, the words are no longer po no, but in fact, the pronunciation is wow. 'Tis light, The word ao, of course, means light. But the kaona, the hidden meaning, of course, is not talking just about the physical darkness to light. It's really talking about we as human beings, that in our evolution, that we have become awakened. And see, to me, that's a very important piece to this story today. I look at this as the same history we are today. That many of us, through our own history, have walked and lived in po, in this kind of darkness. And I don't mean the physical darkness, but I mean darkness in a sense of not knowing, not being able to see. Yeah, everybody knows if you come into a dark room, how do you know where to go? You guess. You feel around. You probably fall down, get hurt. But if I put the light on, or even if I start with a small flashlight, and I see a little, and I get a bigger flashlight, I start to see more. Maybe now I get 3 lights, I see a lot more. You see, now when I navigate in that space, I don't guess anymore, but instead, I journey into the pathway with eyes open, with conscious knowing where I need to go and where I want to go. So when I look at today's events like La Ku'oko'a, to me it's the same kind of question to understand a little bit about a history. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a history as a people to understand why are our people in this condition today? When you look at the socio-economic statistics, poorest in health, poorest in education, we lead all the terrible socio-economic indicators. How come? Were we always this way? No. We became and were created this way. You got to understand, this was created purposely. And how did it do that? By putting us in the dark. By removing the lights that we had as a people. By putting us in a way in which we guess and we just hope and we crawl and we just feel around. But see, I'm a big believer. That's why I such a believer in education, because education is the key. Education is putting that flashlights back in our hands. Education is what is going to give us the necessary tools so we can journey where we need to be as a people. To journey as we wish to be as a people. So when you talk about La Ku'oko'a, see, this is part of the history we got to recognize. When I grew up as a little boy, and I'm sure probably all of us here, how many of us can say when we grew up we learned about La Ku'oko'a? How many of you guys grew up knowing about La Ku'oko'a? How many of us grew up knowing about Thanksgiving? Yeah? Maybe 3rd grade, they made you dress up half the class like Indians, half like pilgrims. You run around the campus. They make one paina. You guys eat corn and some pumpkin pie and some turkey. And that's your holiday. So you got to understand, that is a holiday that was imposed and planted in our brains to replace what was once the main holiday of these islands, which was La Ku'oko'a. See, to me, again, this is the idea. We gain that flashlight. No longer we're going to stay in the darkness. See, once you see the light, you cannot help but to talk about the light. Because you know to stay in darkness is really the key to our destruction as a people. The element that's going to free us from this darkness is for us to understand the value of gaining some of that light. And when I always tell my students, hey, even the smallest flashlight is better than being in total darkness. See, and the goal is to think about how to get more and more of this light. That is the key. Because they will never give us that flashlight. The flashlight is something that we must gain and get for ourselves. You see, and this is part of this journey. So first of all, we think about the kumulipo. We got to understand, we have our own philosophies of life, our own way of understanding that world. Before the so-called coming of Captain Chook, Captain Crook, and the rest of that gang. This is part of our own humanity and history. That we knew, that we understood, and that we learned up until about 4 generations ago, 5 generations ago. And then he was whitewashed out of history. And we can look at thinking about the movement of humanity. We got to think about who we were as a people, which tells us who we are as a people today. When you look at world history, and I'm talking world history, back to Africa, where about 200,000 years ago, the so-called first human beings started to populate and walk upright and speak. What about 100,000 years ago, the first people that migrated out of Africa, moved out of Africa towards Madagascar, they came south to what we call India. Later on made their way to a place they gave the name Sahul, which thinks of, this is the ancient lands, where today you can think of being north of Australia, Malaysia, Indonesia, in those lands. And about 60,000 years ago, these kupuna ended up in that area. And those are the first migrations of humans to leave and to wander and to look out beyond the horizon and question, I wonder what's there. But within them, they had that drive to look for a better tomorrow, and they made their way after thousands of years to those lands. And then right about 15,000 years ago, the last great migrations that leave Africa head more north into what we call Persia, and actually in northern Asia, up above Nepal, into areas of China, and they cross over and they end up in places like Taiwan about 5,000 years ago. And out of Taiwan, these early Pacific Islanders have a new technology, the technology of sailing that they developed to not just sail to the next island, but the ability to use their technology. And I use the word technology, you can understand, technology is nothing new for our people. Technology has always been something of our people. And they use that same technology to enter the Pacific. And what happens, of course, were the last great people to migrate? Well, they got together with the first great people to ever leave Africa. And about 3,000 years ago, they got together in a place today we call Old Polynesia, Samoa, Tonga, and parts of Fiji. And about 3,000 years ago, they got together and they created what became the older Proto-Polynesian culture, our great ancestors. But I want you to think about this. And those ancestors, of course, 3,000 years ago, they created what becomes this Polynesian identity and culture. About 2,000 years ago, they start to spread throughout the rest of the Pacific. And on one of those trips, the first one landed here in Hawaii. But I want you guys to think about this. Who were these people? See, genetically, we understand they were the first guys to leave and also the last guys. See, part of our nature, what brought us to come to Hawaii is part of who we are. These people who were probably the most creative. See, part of our DNA is to be creative, to create new things, new technologies. That's who we are. The second is to be adaptive. That they were able to adapt into different kinds of environments. See, that's part of why I always say, see, the one thing about Hawaiians, we can hang in all kinds of situations because that's kind of who we are. If you look at Hawaii, when they got to Hawaii, and Hawaii is an amazing place, not just the most remote place in the world, thousands of miles for the nearest continent, thousands. That they say to get here, new life form, maybe once in every 100,000 years it took for the so-called new pioneer species to get here and then adapt to this environment. Our kupuna got here about 2,000 years ago. And they came upon this land, which is also not just the most remote, and physically just to get here. We come from the greatest explorers to ever walk upon this planet. That is us. That is who we are still to this day. So you got to understand this story. As I was saying, we weren't the ones who was afraid, who was scared, who were lazy. Say, no, we come from the stock who said, hey, I'm going to move. I'm heading into the future. They're unafraid. to check out the new horizon. That is part of who we are. And they come to this place, not just the most remote, but Hawaii also, when you look at landscapes, there's really no place in the world that has the kind of diversity of landscapes that you have in Hawaii, right? You can be at, and maybe you can talk to my friend Kiahi over there, you can talk to those biologist guys, but I mean, we get rainforests, wet mountaintops, dryland forests, you get lava fields, you have sandy beaches, you have pretty much every type of landscape, as I understand, you can find in anywhere in the world. I think we know about tundra. That's the only one. I think I don't get two, I think we don't have. But see, people know in Hawaii, every valley is different, every island is different, right? You Kaikinui ain't the same as Keanai. Not the same as Lahaina, or Honokohao, or Apitkeokea. But when a kupuna came to these lands, see, they had to adapt to these environments. Not just to one kind of environment. See, most peoples around the world, when the peoples adapted, they usually adapted just to one kind of environment. Our people were able to adapt to the multitudes of any kind of environment that you can have. So part of our nature, you see, part of our nature is to adapt. We can handle. Right? Think about the fishing our people did. You like shoreline fishing, reef fishing, cliff fishing, deep blue fishing. It wasn't just one type of fishing. When you think about growing kalo, everybody know even growing kalo. Number one way for do one style, everybody do the same. Because every valley going to be a little bit different. The temperature of the water, the speed of the water, the kind of lepo you have. So whether it's a wetland lo'i or a dryland mala, it's all going to be different. Growing kalo in Keoke ain't going to be the same as growing kalo in Lahaina. The conditions are different. So my point is to understand, this is part of our nature. These are things we got to celebrate and understand why we can handle. We built this way. Yeah, so we create. We adapt. And the last, of course, we innovate. And innovate, we take a good idea and we improve on that idea. We take a technology and we make it even better. This is part of who we are as a people. And this is why in these islands, we develop a society. Let me ask the question. How many homeless kupuna you think we had? 0. Now, were there times of famine? Yeah, you can read some of our stories of times of famine. But those were basically because of the conditions of maybe the environment, the rain. But generally, who went hungry? Nobody went hungry. Because whose responsibility was it for everyone to eat? To be housed? See, it was all of our responsibilities. Now, when Captain Cook comes cruising in 1778, he calls us the savages, the heathens. But if you read the journals, Captain Cook and King and others, they talk about describing what they saw when they found here also. They were amazed at what they found. They never found a place so clean. They never saw people so healthy. What they was amazed also, they saw people who were today you would call handicapped, people who were blind. In other words, what they saw within the structure of society, no one was left out because of any kind of physical disabilities. Now let's compare that in 1778 to London. What do you think London was like back then? Were there homeless people? Hell yeah. People starving? Hell yeah. They had open sewers running through London. It was lucky they actually took a bath once a year. And he called us the savages. You know, all the jokes always say when Captain Cook came. How many of you guys know Captain Cook? Most of his men couldn't even swim. They were dirty. They were sickly. They had no teeth. They smelled too, that's for sure. And they called us the savages. What's the average height of Captain Cook's men? Anybody know? About 5'2". They came upon these Hawaiians where the women were pushing 6 feet. So even when they came here, they were amazed. I want you guys to understand this. This is part of our own knowledge. We got to understand. They did not give us our humanity. They took from us our humanity. And this is the story we will continue to tell. And I'm going to skip along because we know Kamehameha comes about, unites the islands, 1810, the beginning of what becomes the Hawaiian Kingdom. Yeah, and for a short while, actually, Hawaiian Kingdom was part and connected to the British Empire. Right, and that's why, of course, Liho, Kamehameha II travels to England. Of course, he dies there. But we had this relationship with England at this time. And we jump ahead to 1843, two big events of 1843, what's called the Paulet Affair. And this is where England takes over, or British take over. For about 6 months, they take over Hawaii. Gunboat diplomacy, squawking about some land rights and land issues that some of the British citizens were arguing for. Meanwhile, at the same time, the great Kauai Keaoli, being very smart and sharp, already understood what was going on in the rest of the Pacific. And you got to understand, when you look at Hawaii, you also got to look at the Pacific. The British were down in, for example, in New Zealand, I think 1841. They had a Treaty of Waitangi. The French, I think in 1842, take Tahiti. The Germans were down in Samoa. The Dutch were also cruising around the Pacific. So-called European colonizers and the great European powers were cruising the Pacific. Kamehameha, very eleo. Yeah, he sends off his so-called emissaries to go out to secure Hawaii's independence because he really understood if we were going to maintain ourselves into the future, we had to attempt to secure a recognition as a sovereign and independent nation state. And when you put into context, here we are, this little kingdom in these islands in the middle of the Pacific, making the way to travel to the greatest powers of the world at that time. In 1842, they end up with President Tyler in the United States, and they secure a kind of quasi-recognition, and they move on. Sir George Simpson, William Richards, and of course the great Timoteo Ha'alilio. Some of you might be familiar with that famous picture of Timoteo Ha'alilio that today I'm so proud to see. It's a common sight to see the picture being used out there, the memory. See, as little boy, and I was a little boy, and I'm sure most of us here, how many of us guys even knew about Timoteo Ha'alilio? Nothing. But our great-great-great-grandparents did. See, this is that robbery. But once you understand that story, if you don't know that story, you got to hear that story. And it's a kind of sad story, if to put it a long way. So he's given the kuleana to go out. And almost if you think about it, this is a great to secure Hawaii's future depends on his work to go out there. And it's kind of, when you read some of his stuff, you can tell he kind of knew he probably wouldn't come back. So he wouldn't see his beloved homeland anymore. He wouldn't see his beloved people. But he knew, he understood how important this would be. And it's such an amazing story. They end up in Europe. And they're able to manipulate the situation away by meeting people and using some relationships and genealogy to kind of get to the core. And on November 28, we got to know this story. On November 28, 1843, they are successful in gaining this recognition from the greatest powers of their time, which is, of course, England and France. Who, through a declaration that we call today the Anglo-Franco Declaration, recognizes the sovereignty and independence of the Hawaiian Kingdom, this Hawaiian nation state. Now, so many of us may not understand how important this event was. But it's because of that event in 1843, we still have that cornerstone to fight for our humanity today. Because they were able to accomplish as was stated by Brother Willie earlier, to be the first non-European recognized nation state in the world. Wasn't any of the Asian, it wasn't Japan, there was no China, there was no India, there were no African states, no other Polynesian or Pacific states. The first that opened their door was the Hawaiian Kingdom. And what it did forever, it secured our political status. Our political status. Not as a population, not as an ethnic minority, not as just a race, but a people recognized as equals, and I can use this word again, equals with the great powers of the world. This is an accomplishment when you put into it, when you really understand the history. It is amazing. I mean, you want to say blessings from the Akua, you want to say determination, you want to say using aloha spirit that was used to guide us to get that accomplishment. This is one of the greatest accomplishments that was ever performed. In 1843, November 28, La Ku'ukua. And that's the why it became the most important national holiday for our people. So we remember the accomplishments of people like Timoteo Ha'alilio. Remember those who sacrificed their lives like him, who never got to come back, who gave his life for our kingdom. So it's important that we remember his name and we speak his name, because it's not something we refer to just as a memory. So I would say this is a gift from his life and our kupuna that gives us today. So empowers us today to do what we need to do today. And so we jump ahead and we can talk about the so-called overthrow. And we can talk about the great works of people like Lili'uokalani, who also secured our national sovereignty in her great works and her great words. When faced off with the U.S. Marines with their cannons facing on January 16th, they landed off the USS Boston. 187 Marines off at that time was considered the most technologically war machine advanced gunboat that they ever had. Just happened to be in Honolulu Harbor. And they marched down and they faced the palace. And when Lili was confronted with the question, and she basically says, she don't want any bloodshed. She knew she was in the right. She knew she was in the right even under law. And she says, I yield my. So she used her authority as the queen. Constitutional Hawaiian Kingdom. And so this is part of the mythologies. We got to there's mythologies and stories and false and fake news and history. And that BS has been used in ways to confuse our people to not understand part of all this history. And like I was talking, which has put us in this darkness. So when people tell us, the queen, she gave up. She signed over the kingdom. She signed over the throne. She signed over the lands. See, that's all part of the bullshit. That's part of the darkness, which has invaded our minds and hearts for far too long. Because the truth is, she never consented, never did consent to the so-called provisional government and what becomes the Republic of Hawaii. Never did. And Grover Cleveland, in fact, in his address to Congress in December of 1893, in describing the events that occurred in January of that year when the U.S. forces illegally landed in Honolulu, there's a couple of things he says. First of all, he describes the action of the U.S. military as an act of war. This is not radical Hawaiians making up this stuff. These are the words of the U.S. president to describe the actions of the Marines in Hawaii as an act of war because it was an illegal action taken. He also describes the presence of the U.S. military in Hawaii at that time, as he calls it, the military occupation of Honolulu. So you can understand, when we use words like occupation, see, we who have become educated in the system, we understand what these words mean. And we got to be proud. We got to be smart. We got to be articulate to use these words. This is not just open up hyperbole. This is not just empty rhetoric. So whether or not you buy into the idea of Hawaii being occupied or not, that is something for you to figure out. But I will challenge you to show me counter evidence to the evidence we can show overwhelmingly where the United States themselves describes their presence in these islands as an illegal military occupation. So why are we afraid to today to not say those kinds of words? Who has put fear in your heart? Who has put confusion in your brain to make you worry about using these words? See, that's the thing. We have the power of the mana of our waha. And thankfully, we have the great works of people like Timoteo Ha'alilio and Queen Liliuokalani. And it's because of those words that today, it's a new day. It's a new dawning for our people. The key to the resurrection of our people, or the reclaiming of our people for our own right to drive our own destiny, is education. Because education gives us the fuel to not be afraid. Education gives us the fuel so we can unite and work together. See, as I tell people, it's hard to unite with somebody who's still in darkness, who's still falling down. But once you give them that little flashlight to see and learn, they cannot help but themselves, but to want to see better and know more. See, that's why to me, education is the key. And we got to understand, we were put into this situation purposely. This wasn't just something that happened inevitable. When you look at what occurred in 1895, one of the first things the so-called Republic of Hawaii did was they banned the medium of Hawaiian language as the language of instruction. Now, why would they do that? Because Hawaii sounded funny? Although for many decades, our educational institution, our economic institutions, our courts, our legislature were done in the Hawaiian language, you mean all of a sudden it's not valuable anymore? No, it had to do with political control of our minds. He or she that controls the education of the people control the minds of the people. If I teach you that you have no history, if I teach you, oh, you Hawaiians just kind of got here by hanging on to some logs and, luckily ended up on these shores, or if I teach you you're a bunch of heathens and savages who didn't know anything, then we should have been lucky when I was going to school because we had May Day and I don't know what else we had, any kind of sense of Hawaiianness in our schools. Because that's all we were. That's not what we were. That's what we became. Their goal was to teach us to see our reality as their reality. To make us think that their history is our history. To make us think that their laws and their heroes are ours. So we grew up with watching things like Davy Crockett and Daniel Boone and Daffy Duck and Cinderella, Gilligan's Island. Exactly. How many of us learned about Lono'i Kamakahiki, Kamakamahi'ai? How many of us learned that Timoteo Ha'alilio? But our kupuna did in 1893. They knew that in 1897. They knew that in 1898. But quickly, as the power of education was taken away from us, where we had been, as Brother Willie has said, we don't come from people who did not appreciate and understand education. In fact, we came from the people, we could argue, who was as educated as any other place on this planet. I want you guys to think about that. Our kupuna read. You can look in the Hawaiian language newspapers. You can read Hawaiian. You can read Ivanhoe. You can read 10,000 Leagues Under the Sea. You can read even Hamlet by Shakespeare in Hawaiian. Those were the stories that people were reading. That's not to mention our own stories that they understood also. So we come from a worldly people. We've always been a worldly people. It's just that we've been taught to believe somehow that being in the dark is our natural place to be. And I'm here to say that's false consciousness. That's something that was taught us. That's something that was made us to become into these people who somehow have accepted that position of being less than human. But for me, it's the total opposite. So I look at all the various issues that are attacking us on Maui to this day. Whether it's protecting our sacred lands of Haleakala, or Mauna Kea, or Iao. If we cannot define for ourselves and control for ourselves our own sacred lands, we're not free. We're fools. Because sovereignty is not about putting your name on a paper, getting one free t-shirt. That has nothing to do with sovereignty. That has to do with foolishness. That's about being pimped. That's about being used. That's about keeping yourself in darkness. I, on that end, believe that all of us need to educate ourselves. And I just see our petition crew over there, which is also part of this remembering. See, today we get no confusion. If you're confused about, I wonder what my kupuna thought in 1898. Well, we're fortunate today because you can probably go to that booth and tent over there and find the name of our kupuna who signed the name to the petitions, which directly says they do not give consent and they do not wish to be taken by the United States of America. That is clear. The confusion came about when that knowledge and disconnection occurred with the words of our kupuna. And that's why I believe, whether we're talking about our unity as a people, whether you're talking about rights of self-determination, whether you're talking about a political will, economic development, nation building as a people, the foundation begins with us controlling and demanding our own right to maintain and educate ourselves. Educate ourselves on our own history. Educate ourselves on where we want to go. And there's so much of this history we can continue to look at. When you talk about dehumanization, the fact that our iwi kupuna, and I'm talking in 2017, are not just being disturbed, but are still being dug up from the ground. Yeah? So whether it's up in the Wailuku area, Napuone, or whether it's currently going on right now, where my family's from, Mokai, in Hamoa Beach, where Travasa Maui Hotel is doing the expansion of their sewer facilities for the tourist industry down there. So they got to put a new sewer system in. And where do you think they're going to build this new system? Right up on Native Hawaiian burials. They get no problem in that. And that's going on right now. This is going on today in 2017. Or we can talk about the return of the waters of East Maui or West Maui. Waters that have always belonged to our people of those lands. Waters which have always flown for millions of years on those lands, which have been diverted in the last 100 years. Not for the betterment of people of the land, but for the benefit of a few at the expense of us, our people. So these struggles are struggles that we continue on even to this day. I'm going to leave with the four things I always, as an educator, I leave. And I speak about in nation building. The first step is to recognize Yeah, recognize means to learn, to study, to listen. Learn our history. Listen to our stories. Sit with our kupuna. Go check out the Ku'e petitions. Learn. We all can learn. We all must learn. We must recognize who we are. We must understand our own humanity. We should know by heart the great deeds of people like Timoteo Ha'alilio. We should know by heart and celebrate La Ku'oko'a. And the next step is to analyze. Yeah, once you understand more, now you start to analyze the situation. You start to analyze who are the powers to be, why they do what they do, who's benefiting from the so-called actions. Why is water continuing to be taken out of East Maui? Who does it benefit? And when you think about it, let me give you, if you're not clear about East Maui's water, from Ko'olau, all the way from Nahiku, all the way down. The amount of fresh water that's taken out of East Maui every day equals all the domestic water use on the island of Oahu. I want you to think about that. What is the purpose of that water banking? Who will benefit by the billions of dollars if they're allowed to use that water for jacuzzis, maybe some golf courses, maybe for some swimming pools in some gated communities? It won't be the people of this land. So we must analyze this situation. And then fourth, we got to organize. Organize means working with one another. See, this is when you struggle together. This is when we work together to unify common goals, whether it's community associations, whether it's an education, whether it's being the PTA parent, whether it's being a coach on the soccer team. It's taking those leadership positions to organize amongst ourselves, to create the communities that we need to create. And lastly, is to exercise. You cannot talk about Hawaiian rights and just talk about it. You cannot talk about, oh, those are some sacred lands we need to protect, and you don't protect them. You cannot talk about how Hawaiian language is so important to our people, and you don't even try to learn one word a day. See, there's always something we can do. And to exercise yourself, being Hawaiian isn't just, as I always say, to be Hawaiian. I don't worry about the noun part. I am a Hawaiian. I worry about the verb usage. I be Hawaiian. See, and that's the exercise part. It's not enough to talk about aloha aina. You must be aloha aina. So we have to recognize, analyze, organize, and exercise. Take ourselves out of the darkness, put ourselves into the light. And one thing with going into the light, who benefits from going into the light? All peoples. Whether you're purple, brown, black, or pink, whether you get nice long hair, no more hair. Education is one thing that benefits everybody. Miseducation is one thing that benefits some. Okay. Mahalo nui. Aloha ai no oia i'o.
I'm reading a book right now called Dear World, written by a 12-year-old girl in Syria. And to piggyback on what he said is that Assad, who did he kill first? The educators. He went after the universities and bombed the schools, the universities, and killed the professors, because to shut them up was to have him have full power over the people of Syria.